this might be the first year since, I think it's 2011, where Gonzaga getting into the NCAA tournament is conditional, where for the last decade, it has been an automatic. It is now conditional. Welcome back, everybody. It was a little bit of an exaggerated holiday break, so I hope everyone had a great Christmas, great holiday. I am back with the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. And so there's a couple of weeks of stuff to get over, to talk about. So we'll be talking a little bit more high level about what the performances we've seen from teams means moving forward. Some housekeeping. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. Hit that subscribe button there on the YouTube video. Be sure to like and favorite on your favorite streaming service as well. Follow on social media at Posts by Zach. Also, there's the official podcast account at Unoff WCC Pod, so be sure to follow along there as well. All right, so going to get into a lot in this episode. We have we'll talk a little bit about Santa Clara and St. Mary's, who seem to be having kind of like very up and down, almost to a point kind of frustrating non-conference season. So we'll get into that. Gonzaga's non-conference schedule just not doing them any favors. We'll get into what that could potentially mean down the road as we get closer to March. And then also WCC play is just about a week away. That's going to be really exciting to finally get to conference play. And to an extent, some of these teams might need the reset of being done with non-conference and getting into WCC play. But first, as we talk about WCC play and what that's going to look like, we have to talk about the two newest members of the WCC who will begin playing in all sponsored sports except for baseball next year, and that being Washington State and Oregon State. The two remaining Pac-12 teams have partnered with the WCC to participate in all the WCC sponsored sports except for baseball, beginning the 24-25 season, and then this will continue for now through the 25-26 campaign. And this is a great move for both sides, for the WCC and also for Washington State and Oregon State. And I know that on a basketball front, if you only look at a basketball front, this looks like a kind of not an overly exciting move, because Washington State and Oregon State may not necessarily move the needle like some other programs will, but this is a big deal on just what that says about the WCC, that the two remaining Pac-12 schools, as they continue to figure out what's going to happen on the football front and that end, that they have decided the WCC is a legit pit stop for them as they figure everything out. This move gives you one of the better, Washington State immediately becomes one of the better WCC teams on the basketball front. And Oregon State, even though they have not been good for a while now, this is still a big program that's going to bring a lot of support. And their other programs really do help the conference as a whole. Yes, we won't get their baseball team will still be independent, so the WCC won't get that benefit of having the level of an Oregon State baseball team as part of the conference. But this does still add some level of legitimacy to the WCC as a destination. Just 1 year separated from BYU leaving. BYU was here for just north of a decade, and this was a good enough spot for them. And now Washington, Oregon State have deemed it a good enough spot for them to land as well, at least for the interim. What this immediately means is that the WCC will be an 11-team league going into next year. It'd still be decided whether or not it'll be an 18 or a 20-game schedule. the WCC tournament will need to be reformatted to accommodate 2 new teams. This will be the largest the WCC has been. I actually would need to double check on that. This might be the largest the WCC has ever been, with 11 teams. Both teams will be part of the WCC's media rights agreement. That is per the West Coast Conference's release last week. And it is also still to be determined how the NCAA tournament shares will be divvied up. And as we know, the current situation does actually benefit Gonzaga greatly in their specific situation. So we'll see how exactly how the insertion of Washington State and Oregon State will impact that. But overall, this is great news for the WCC, for the West Coast Conference. It adds 2 Power 6 schools, which you can go back and forth on talking about how powerful these 2 are, but the fact is that these 2 do bring Power 6 swag and legitimacy to a mid-major league. And all the sports are going to be bolstered by this. Volleyball gets bolstered by this. Men's and women's basketball gets bolstered by this. The soccers get bolstered by this. So there's not going to be a program, a sport in the WCC that is not helped by the addition of these 2 schools. And right now, if you look at the net rankings as of Monday night or Tuesday night, when I actually looked at this, you have the 1st and 8th ranked WCC teams if you were to insert them into the league right now. Yes, Washington State would actually have the best net ranking of any of the WCC teams playing right now. And that means the WCC will have only spent 1 year as a 9-team league after the departure of BYU. So a year ago, 10 teams with BYU. BYU leaves, and only 1 year separated, they add 2 more and 2 legitimate programs back into this league. And this says a couple of things to me. And I think the one thing that many got caught up with, and maybe because the WCC schools had previously just gone this route, it had been a while since this sort of thing had happened, is that they're clearly willing to look at secular universities again as options. And this wouldn't have been the first time that you will have secular schools as part of the WCC. Now, it's been a long time since that has happened, but it's not unprecedented for this league to have gone down that road. San Jose State was part of the league in the 50s and 60s. Nevada was part of the league in the 70s. UNLV, Santa Barbara, Fresno State, all used to be part of the WCC at one point or another. So this isn't new ground. This isn't something that hasn't been done before. And what this also does is opens up the possibility of who else could the WCC add moving forward. And with that, it's like it also shows that this league is going to be quick to act on realignment, because again, it's only a year separated from losing BYU, and very quickly within a year, they have found 2 replacements. Even if they are short-term replacements as of now, they are still going to be really good replacements for BYU and what those 2 teams brought. And if they're not going to rest on what they have, that opens the door of maybe a Grand Canyon, maybe a Seattle U. But hell, maybe this opens the door even more to what could be a trickle-down effect. Because this is the temporary stop as Washington State and Oregon State figure out what to do with the Pac-12, and specifically what to do with football, because football will be independent for these 2 years for those 2 programs. And I think it's largely believed, and it was probably very accurately believed, that what those 2 schools are going to do is try to reconstitute the Pac, whatever it's going to be, by poaching a good number of the Mountain West schools. And this gives them the opportunity to house all their other sports as they figure out football. And does that mean that the likes of San Diego State, Could be San Diego State, Boise, Nevada, UNLV, Utah State, Fresno State, all go with Oregon State and Washington State. Maybe. It's very possible that that's what ends up happening. Those schools end up jumping ship. But then what the WCC could be in position to do is to then maybe poach the rest of what is left of the Mountain West. Again, if you start to think about what the Mountain West has been such a solid basketball conference for a number of years now, and this year they are looking really good. You think about like some of the other teams that I didn't even name Colorado State. I didn't even talk about New Mexico. Some other teams that very well could end up shifting over and be a possibility for the WCC to actually pick up and add some depth to that league. Again, they've now shown the WCC has now shown that it is willing to go down the secular route, go down the non-religiously affiliated school route with these two additions. And if this works out, if this partnership starts to show that, hey, this is going to be a mutually beneficial thing, then you could very well see the next dominoes be, let's see what we can maybe get out of the Mountain West. Maybe there's some teams there that we could take as well. So I think this opens up a lot of fascinating possibilities of what could be, of what could happen as the realignment talk continues and we continue to go down this road. And now I do wonder about this part, because I say all of that, and there's still the question of, does this move impact Gonzaga at all? Does this change the fact that they've been looking at the Big 12 and the Big East or the Big 10? I don't know. I don't think it does. I don't think this changes much for Gonzaga. I think it helps in the short term. I don't think it changes the big picture when it comes to how they're going to look at the WCC and their greater opportunities that could be in other leagues. That said, I do think what this also shows is that the WCC is going to continue to make moves and look to improve regardless of what Gonzaga is up to. And I think that's the way you have to operate, because I don't know if it's an internal conversation at all or how this goes, but I would think that if you're in WCC offices, that you kind of have to operate as though Gonzaga leaving is a near inevitability, and we are going to try to improve this league regardless of what they think. Because Gonzaga may not be as invested in the long-term viability of the WCC as much as they are, obviously, and rightfully so, more concerned about the long-term viability of Gonzaga athletics. Again, that makes sense. That's not saying that Gonzaga are bad people or anything like that. It's saying that this is a reality. Gonzaga is looking out for Gonzaga, and they should. The WCC should be looking out for the WCC, and they should. And for the WCC, I think that is regardless of what Gonzaga thinks, regardless of what they are doing. I think, at least for the last X number of years, looking out for what is best for Gonzaga has probably been in the best interest of the WCC. At this stage, with them looking for other exits, the WCC looking out for its own best interest is to add as many good teams as you possibly can, regardless of what Gonzaga thinks. Then again, because there are no teams you're going to add, in my opinion, that are going to be able to match up to the Big 12 or the Big East options that already exist. Gonzaga going to those leagues immediately, they will play better teams. That's just a fact. And doesn't matter how many of those Mountain West teams you add. Doesn't matter if like my pie in the sky Super League actually happens or not. The WCC needs to add as many good teams as it possibly can, and it does look like it's going to be more aggressive because, again, who before last week even had that on their bingo card, on their radar, that Washington State and Oregon State would be playing in the WCC next year? I'm sure that was really low on everybody's probability list. But here we are. Washington State and Oregon State will be joining the WCC. It is a great move for the league. I think it's a great fit for those two schools in the interim as they figure their stuff out. Do I think that this could actually be a bit of a primer of that proposed Super League I talked about before the year of like, this might work? You know what? Now that Washington State and Oregon State have said the WCC is a good temp option, they might poach Mountain West schools. They might not. But they could have a football league with the Mountain West and the two Pac-12 schools and do all of that, whatever they're going to do. And then maybe you expand it to a larger league for basketball and the other sports. I think there is a realistic option. There's a realistic scenario where it's viable, because I think that these leagues have to think more creatively. These teams, these universities have to think more creatively about how this is going to look, because the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12 are playing at a different level. And when you're competing against those leagues, when you're trying to compete against those leagues, you have to think about it on a different level and in a different way. And maybe there's some level of, like, Chip Kelly, UCLA's head coach, mentioned it. Like, football should be separate. Maybe that's how you do it for these leagues, for these teams. Then you make all the other sports into their own super league. You maybe toy with the idea of relegation. You toy with different ideas and different formats to get buy-in, to get some more interest into what you're doing with these teams. And a lot still to talk about, a lot still to get into. We'll find out more as the season continues to go along, but that was a shocker last week. Did not see it coming, and this is going to be exciting to see how this all plays out over the next 2 years. Now, something that has not been as exciting, something that has kind of given me just not stress, but is driving me a little on the nutty side, is watching the results for Santa Clara and for St. Mary's over the last couple weeks, because Santa Clara is sitting at 9-5, and they've actually had some pretty good wins over that span. They did beat Washington State. They beat Duquesne over the weekend. Those are two really good wins. Two really good wins, as we talked about, just like the number of chances Santa Clara was going to have. And they just missed a game against Utah State. They lost that one by 2. No shame in losing to a team like Utah State. That is a really good team. USF then saw that a couple nights later, how good that team was. They lost to Utah State by 1. But then going on the road, I say road because it's just across down the street, losing at San Jose State to a not great Spartans team is not a good look. Is not the way you would like this team to be moving up the ladder. And that's the one that stings. That's the one where it's like, you lost to Cal. You shouldn't have lost to Cal. You lose to San Jose State. You shouldn't have lost to San Jose State. And those were two true road games. But at the same time, it's like, those are teams, if you think you are one of those teams that potentially had a chance at an NCAA tournament berth, chance for an at-large, to be in that conversation, those are teams you have to beat. Like, you can't be losing to those teams, because you are more talented than they are. You are more put together than they are. And so that's where it gets frustrating with a team like Santa Clara. They have, after all that, they have moved up to 105 in the net. They were hovering around like the 120s, 110s. So they're hovering, and they might be able to climb back into the NIT conversation, depending on how their WCC season goes. They do have Yale on, I believe it's on Friday. So they have another good game at the Levy Center that they can be able to pull that one off and start to slowly climb into this. And maybe if there's no more bad losses, and which means don't lose anybody in the bottom half of the WCC. Maybe they get back into the NIT conversation. I mean, hell, even if you actually get a win over, at this stage, USF or Gonzaga, maybe you do start to knock on the at-large door one more time. Maybe, just maybe, get back into that conversation. But one of the things that's actually been really exciting to watch with Santa Clara, I don't want to talk all doom and gloom with Santa Clara, because again, they're still 9-5. They've had some really good wins. The metrics have still not been terribly kind to them because of some of the losses they have. But the brightest thing I want to highlight has just been the performance of Adama Alpha Ball, because it really does look like we're going to be 3 for 3. Santa Clara maybe having the most dynamic player in the league who has the potential. I mean, the way he's played right now, he looks the part of an NBA player. He looks the part. He has the body. He has the movements. He has the production right now. I mean, kind of crazy to look at what he's doing right now. So he had 19 against Duquesne on Saturday, but it's becoming very clear that he has become the next dude. Jalen Williams, Brandon Pajemski, now Adama Ball. He takes over games late. He can make plays for others when needed. He's averaging over 15 a game, a team high, 4th in the WCC. He's shooting 51% from the field. He's shooting 41% from 3. He's averaging a team high 3 assists a game. He has over a steal a game. His best 3 games have been against the Pac-12 schools that Santa Clara has played to this point. All 3 of his 20-point games have come against Pac-12 opponents. And okay, maybe there's some familiarity with them because he did see them when he was at Arizona, even if he didn't play all that much last year. Adama Ball could very well be in the race for WCC Player of the Year as we start conference play, because he's a difference maker on this team, and I don't know if there's another guard in this league right now that can carry a team like he can. I don't know if that guy exists. That guy does not exist at St. Mary's. That guy does not exist, I don't think, at USF, not on a 9-in, 9-out basis. Marcus Williams has been good, but not that good. And I don't think that guy is at Gonzaga right now. I don't think that's Nolan Hickman. I don't think that's even Ryan Nemhard at this stage. I think Adama Ball has shown to this point that he can be that guy late in games and get the job done against high-level competition. And yeah, that's no knock on any of the others, because I think the guys I specifically mentioned have been very good this year. Adama Ball just seems to be getting on a different level, and that's where I think I'm trying to get at. It's that he's going to be the guy to watch the rest of conference play. And let's keep in mind that Santa Clara does see both Gonzaga and St. Mary's in the second week of conference play, and that is coming up in just a couple of weeks here. So we're going to see how he's able to react and able to adjust to who have been the top 2 teams in this league for essentially the last 20 years. All right. And talked about St. Mary's a little bit, and St. Mary's has also been the frustrating one, because going into the year, I said it, a number of people have had very high expectations of this Gales team. I had some very high expectations of this Gales team. I was talking Sweet 16, second weekend. Now, I wasn't going to go as far as John Goodman, who had Final Four, but that aside. They sit at 8-6 now, and 4 of those losses are to Q1, Q2 teams. San Diego State, Xavier, Boise. It's like they've lost to some good teams. But they've also lost to Weber State and Missouri State. And yes, Missouri State, the loss over the weekend, they are now a top 100 net team. But both of those games came at home, and they both count as Q3 losses. And that is where it gets ugly. Again, it's nothing against those teams. Is that metrically, this is not what should be happening. And even just on the surface, like a team like St. Mary's, with the reputation they have, with the expectations that they've had, should not be losing to those teams. And the inconsistency of this team has been, I've highlighted throughout the course of the year. But it also, I think the part about that one that's almost more frustrating is because it looked like that they might have turned a corner. After the Colorado State win, it looked like that the switch had finally been flipped. And they looked like that they were moving in the right direction. They had won 3 straight. Their net got all the way back up to 50. Then they lose the game to Missouri State at home, which didn't drop them a ton. They did drop to 59. But the metrics and the numbers are not, or at least the quarter system is not going to do St. Mary's any favors as far as like potential at large or whatnot, because their number of opportunities on that front is now dwindled to just being Gonzaga and USF and Santa Clara on the road. Those are the 3 right now that they still have any level of room to move up. And they do get at least a little bit of help at the beginning of conference play. They do have Kent State this week, and then they start league play with San Diego at LMU and then also Portland. So they kind of a little bit, to an extent, ease into WCC play before they see some of the teams that are going to compete toward the top. Santa Clara, they're going to be at Santa Clara and at USF in that, I believe, let's see, the first, second, third week of WCC play. And those two, I think those are going to be really, really tough games. Santa Clara, already just talked about them. I think they're going to be in that. They're going to be in that mix. USF has been the most consistent of any of these teams, and they're also the only one with 10 wins. So I think this USF squad is going to give St. Mary's maybe more problems than we've seen in the recent past. Santa Clara, we know, has taken a couple of games from the Gales over the last few years. So this is a team that does know how to play against St. Mary's. And again, a lot of the same guys are still on the St. Mary's team. So this should be a group that is familiar with how Santa Clara is going to try to beat them. And I think these games are just going to be really fun to watch and really fascinating as we get closer. But the St. Mary's team needs to find some level of consistency offensively. And again, this is where they have gotten themselves in trouble, is the consistency offensively. And over the last few weeks, we started to see a little bit more from Augustus Marshallonis, from Josh Jefferson. And that was great. That was where they needed guys to step up and be able to be better moving forward. But the other thing, and I think I have not talked about it all that much. I've kind of glossed over it because initially I was thinking it was because that he wasn't getting a lot of help from the rest of the team. So I was giving Aiden Mahaney the benefit of the doubt when it came to what his numbers looked like. Because, I mean, honestly, like when you have to carry the whole team and you're the only significant offensive threat, like I get it. But now that we've seen Mitchell Saxon start to come through a little bit more, now that we've seen some of the other guys start to come through a little bit more, I think it is now fair to start to look at Mahaney and start to ask the question, what has happened? Because it's not like that it's changed over the last few games as others have come along for the ride. And he did have a good game this past week. I'm not going to gloss over the fact that he did have 16 points against Missouri State, 6 for 16, 4 assists. But for the most part, like you look through the game log, and since that Colorado State game, and again, like that, you could say that's the turning point for St. Mary's. 2 for 11, 3 for 20, 1 for 8, 4 for 10, 6 for 16. Aiden Mahaney is shooting 36% from the field, 31% from 3, both obviously down significantly from where he was a year ago. And, it does look like maybe he did hit the sophomore slump. He's hit the wall. And there's not, and this these things happen. This happens to sophomores, and there was that. So maybe this is a carryover from last year where he did struggle a little bit more as teams started to figure him out. Maybe it's the adjustment that the fact that now this is a full off season, a full non-conference schedule where he was the chief read on any scout was stop Aiden Mahaney. And teams, for the most part, have done a pretty good job of containing Aiden Mahaney. And if he can turn it around in WCC play, this team looks completely different. But there's a lot of inconsistency with the St. Mary's offense. Going into conference play, it might just be what they need to get to see some teams that are they're more familiar with. And big picture for St. Mary's, already talked about it. I still think it's true. For them, the path back to the NCAA tournament is to get back to Las Vegas and win the conference tournament. I think the at-large conversation is going to be a very difficult one because of those Q3 losses, because of the lack of opportunities for other Q1, Q2 games. Because otherwise, unless they sweep Gonzaga, I don't know if that's going to be enough for the committee to say, yes, this is a tournament team. And I wanted to throw out this hypothetical because let's say I give you a team that is 22-6. They're 0-5 in Q1 games. They have a net non-con strength of schedule of 68. So not great, but not terrible. And they're hovering somewhere between 40 and 50 in the net. Is that a tournament team? And I give you this scenario because I think this is a still in play, real possible scenario for Gonzaga. And I think that the metrics and the teams that Gonzaga has played in the non-conference have done them no favors, have not helped them in any sort of way. And those teams, even though Gonzaga has handled their business and done what they were supposed to do, might actually cost Gonzaga a potential at-large if they do not win the conference tournament in Vegas. In the last 3 years, and this is where I bring this up. So Gonzaga right now is 0-3 against Q1 opponents. They do have 2 more. Well, they potentially have 4 more right now. San Diego State on Friday, and then they have Kentucky, USF, and St. Mary's on the road. So there are still a few more chances for them. But this is where I did a little bit of I was doing some research, and this is the number I think that is critical for Gonzaga when it comes to the importance of the conference tournament this year and the remaining Q1s. In the last 3 years, every at-large selection has had at least one Q1 victory. Every last one. And of the 108 at-large selections in those 3 years, all but 3 had at least 2 Q1 victories. So, and those 3, there was one last year that was a NC State who was 23-11. They were 1-6 in Q1 games. They were 45 in the net. In 21, there were 2 of those teams. One of them was a 23-4 Drake team. They were 1-2 against Q1 opponents, 45 in the net. The other one, Syracuse at 16-9. They were 1-7 against Q1 opponents, and they were 40 in the net. Gonzaga is currently 45 in the net. And really, realistically, they do have, again, not counting the remaining 2 non-conference games that Gonzaga has, which are both Q1 opportunities. In WCC play, no one, as per the usual, no one but St. Mary's, USF, and Santa Clara will help them go up in these ratings, because the rest of the league has not done their part and is going to likely drag everyone else down. And metrically, let's take all of that aside, at least for the moment, and also look at this, that this Gonzaga team has actually looked mortal for the first time in a long time. And I've discussed it, many others have discussed how thin this team is, especially with some of the injuries that they've picked up over the last few months and in the last couple weeks. We know that they also really haven't had someone really step up in a big way consistently. Like Ryan Hemard's kind of been that guy. Sometimes it's been Nolan Hickman, but then he'll disappear for a half. It has, like, Anton Watson can't be relied completely upon to do all of that late in games because he's not the primary ball handler. So you can't put that on Dusty Stromer because he's a freshman. So there's a lot of things that I think that don't help Gonzaga when it comes to this scenario. They have looked vulnerable. The metrics are not helping them. The teams they have beaten are not helping them. Their last few remaining chances, like, so San Diego State is at 29 right now, as an example, and they're hosting. Weird note, it's like they would be a Q1 right now, but if Gonzaga beats them, they likely would not be a Q1 anymore. So I think this presents a really interesting, unique challenge for Gonzaga going into WCC play, because this might be the first year since, I think it's 2011, where Gonzaga getting into the NCAA tournament is conditional, where for the last decade, it has been an automatic. It is now conditional. Because I think, as I mentioned, the other three teams that are the only three that I think can help them go up, they are also the only three teams, and I think they are three teams that are all capable of beating Gonzaga. USF has been the most consistent. St. Mary's has shown the ability to be just as dangerous as they ever have been, even if they've been wildly inconsistent. Santa Clara has shown the potential to beat anyone. They just need to show up a little bit on the defensive end, which has been inconsistent. And this is the scenario I've been thinking about. Again, I brought up that 22-6 earlier. Right now, Gonzaga is 9-3. In this scenario, I am assuming that they don't win either of the other non-conference games. So they lose to San Diego State, they lose at Kentucky. I'm assuming those two losses. And with the assumption of those two losses, if they lose one game before the final week of WCC play, and it doesn't matter who it is, let's say they lose one. So that would put them at 22-6. Going into that last week of WCC play, that last week of February going into March. That means they will not have a Q1 win. They will be 0-5 going into that weekend. And that week, they will be on the road for 2. They will be at USF and at St. Mary's, needing a Q1 win. Needing a Q1 win. And I am unsure. I am unclear. This is the biggest question mark I have of any Gonzaga team in a long, long time. The numbers are not playing in their favor. Their depth has just been an issue. Again, this is not a question of talent. This is a question of depth. This is a question of experience. This is a question of so many other things that are surrounding this team as opposed and not just solely what each individual player is capable of. Is Gonzaga in danger of not being eligible for an at-large? I think the answer is yes, and I do think it actually does need to be taken more seriously. As even you look at through some of the bracketologies, they are slipping and slipping and slipping, and it has had nothing to do with them. All right. With that, I'll wrap up this episode. Be sure to, again, one more time, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit that like button, and favorite on your favorite streaming services. Follow along on social media at Post by Zach. Also on Twitter, unoff WCC Pod. Do all the things. We'll be back after the new year with a couple of new episodes, with more episodes. We're going to do a full WCC play preview. I'm going to be organizing that, so stay tuned for details on that as well. All right, one more time. Thanks for hopping on. Thanks for hanging out and watching. Happy New Year, everybody, and I will catch you later.